mainly kidneys, because kidneys are responsible for the formation of urine, and we also have other organs to play a role here. Like in the case of urinary system, we have liver to play a most important role. Why? Because liver is responsible for metabolism, and whatever we are eating, whatever food we are eating is metabolized by the liver, and all the excess of the gastric juices, all the excess of the enzymes, and all the waste materials are thrown out of the body. The enzymes are given back to the digestive system, and the waste material is given to the kidneys, and through this process the waste material is given out, and the excess of enzymes are also sent back to their respective places. So what is happening in the urinary system? Liver is acting as playing a major role for metabolism. And when I say metabolism, this clearly means that breakdown of whatever food we have eaten into simpler forms to use them as a building block, as a storage material for repair and regeneration, and through different forms. But in the course of that process, there are some molecules which are being formed which are not required by the body. Why? Because they are toxic in nature. So let me give you one example of how urine is formed. Like what is happening when proteins are being metabolized by the liver. When protein is being metabolized, then this leads to the formation of amino acids. Fine, with double A I am going to say here amino acids. And what is amino acid doing here? Amino acid, whenever they are stored in some of the other forms, they are stored as carbohydrates and fats, but the ammonia molecule is not being stored here. So the amino group, or I would preferably say the amino group, is not required and is not stored in the form of carbohydrates and fat. So this is something which is an excess, and this is acting as a toxic molecule because it leads to the formation of ammonia in the body. Fine, we all know that ammonia is toxic in nature. So this highly toxic ammonia is converted to urea by the help of liver, which is less toxic in nature. If I would like to write it down, then I would say that protein was metabolized by liver to form amino acids, and now they are stored in the form of carbohydrates and fat molecules, but they also have an amino group which is not stored in any form, which converts to toxic ammonia in the blood. So now after eating food and after metabolism, this is something which is formed in the blood, and this has to be taken out because this is ammonia and this is toxic in nature. So now this very toxic molecule is converted by liver into urea, which is also toxic in nature but lesser toxic as compared to the ammonia here. So liver converts ammonia into urea, which is thrown out of the body with the help of kidney whenever we are learning about the process of urine formation. So you must have heard that whenever we draw out the composition of urine, there is a major quantity of urea also present there. So that urea is actually formed by the ammonia which is received after metabolism of protein which we have eaten through the food passage. Whatever food we are eating is having protein which is metabolized by liver to form amino acids and carbohydrates and fat molecules, and those molecules, all the helpful material would be used for body development, growth, regeneration. But the waste material here is forming a toxic ammonia molecule which is turning the blood into toxic forms. So that thing has to be chucked off from the body. So liver again helps in conversion of the highly toxic ammonia to the lesser toxic urea molecules. And these urea molecules are now excreted out of the body with the help of kidneys. So how this all is happening? Now we learn of how kidneys are actually helping in removing urea from the blood. So let's take this part and learn more about what kidney looks like and what are the different roles of kidney. Fine. So I'll just say that kidneys are responsible for maintaining blood pressure, blood volumes, pH level. They are responsible for maintaining the homeostasis. They are responsible for maintaining the water concentration. They are responsible for maintaining the ionic concentration, the ionic balance. So these are a lot of roles of kidney. So let's start with the first one, that is how they actually look like. So kidneys are basically bean-shaped structures. They are bean-shaped structures. Kidneys are 2 in number. They are dark brown colored. Okay, and on the top of kidneys we have adrenal glands present, which are again responsible for maintaining the activity of kidney, which is maintaining the due concentration of the respective ions, likely sodium, potassium, and hence maintaining the water concentration, which will further maintain the blood volumes. Fine. So let's learn about how many layers a kidney has. So if I draw up a structure of kidney, it somewhere looks like this. So it has 3 linings or 3 layers present to it. So the outermost would be called as the cortex. Fine. Then we have medulla, and then finally we have pelvis. These are the 3 structures or 3 layers of the kidney which are present, 3 layers preferably. The outermost cortex, then the middle layer medulla, and the innermost, which is the pelvis. Cortex obviously would be responsible for forming a due shape and a core structure to the kidney. Then medulla here is responsible for actually draining the urine into the, for actually secreting the urine, okay, into the tubules. Medulla is responsible for secreting the urine. And what is pelvis doing here? Pelvis is responsible for, it is lined with smooth muscles, and whenever we talk about smooth muscles, one thing comes in common, that the smooth muscles are basically responsible for generating a peristaltic movement to make the fluid pass into the respective areas, and here the respective areas would be the ureter and the urinary bladder. So this is basically helping in draining of the urine into the following tract. And what is the following tract of the kidney? It is ureters and the urinary bladder. So this is how a kidney looks like. So now the most essential part of a kidney is a nephron. We all know that nephrons are forming the kidneys. There are millions of nephrons which are together forming the kidneys, and these are the molecules, these are the structures which are responsible for helping in the formation of process of urine. So nephrons has few parts. Nephron has a glomerulus. Nephron has a PCT, that is proximal convoluted tubule. Nephron has loop of Henle, and when I say loop of Henle, we have the ascending loop of Henle and the descending loop of Henle. Then we have DCT, which is distal convoluted tubule. Then we have collecting duct. Okay, so these are few of the structures which are present in the nephron, and when the blood passes through all the structures forming a filtrate molecule, then ultimately what we have at the end of collecting duct is what we call as urine. So how this actually ascends in a manner that blood is flowing from respective areas. So one thing I like to tell you here is whenever we draw a diagram, it somehow looks like this. There is blood which is entering the glomerulus region, and then there is blood which is leaving the glomerulus region. One matter of fact here is the artery or the arteriole which is bringing in the blood has a larger diameter as compared to the arteriole which is taking the blood out, and that is how we coin different terms calling it as afferent arteriole and efferent arteriole. Okay, afferent and efferent arterioles. They are respectively responsible for bringing in blood and taking out blood. Now what happens is, in the due process, there is a certain amount of pressure which is developed in the nephron region, in the specifically the capsular region of the nephron, which is responsible for making the process of filtration to happen here. Like if I say, this is a box-like structure, a fluid is entering here and a fluid is leaving here. Fine. Then there is certain mechanism which is happening in this area, but with due course, it is only happening when there is a certain difference in pressures. Only then a filtration process would be happening. Like whenever you are draining a fluid with force and against a mesh-like structure, some of the particles are blocked out and some of the particles are easily flown with the liquid. So that is what is happening, but under a certain pressure. And how that pressure is developed here? That pressure is developed here because of the two fluids which are present there and the colloidal pressures which are existing. Because in this structure, when we see, there is a capillary channel, fine, and then here we have the glomerulus region. Okay, glomerulus region is basically consisting a lot of coiled capillaries, and glomerulus is actually coming from a Latin word which means a ball of yarn. A ball of yarn, it's a Latin word. So it's like a woolen thread which is entwined together in a complex manner, giving it larger surface area for making the blood to pass through in some time, so that giving it much time to actually process the due process of filtration of blood. So here what is happening? Blood is entering, blood is leaving. But when the blood is entering and leaving, in that process there is a certain difference in the pressures which we define as the net filtration rate. So NFR or net filtration rate is actually the final filtration pressure through which the amount of blood is entering and filtration rate is happening in that manner, that is ml per minute. So how much blood is actually filtered by the nephron is defined by the net filtration rate. So net filtration rates are affected by the colloidal pressures, net filtration rates are affected by the glomerular hydrostatic pressures. So any pressures acting in opposite manner, so the sum pressure would be a difference of the two pressures. So that we will be talking about in the later half of this lecture. So I just want to clear here that in this region, the filtration process is happening. Whenever we define the process of urine formation, we classify into three different steps. The first step would be called as filtration, and I am writing this in front of here. That does not mean that PCT is responsible for filtration. I am just writing out the three steps. Filtration is the first step, okay, of urine formation. Then tubular reabsorption is the second step of urine formation, and the final step of urine formation is tubular secretion. Okay, so these are the three steps which are responsible for formation of urine. First is filtration, second is tubular reabsorption, and the third one is tubular secretion. So first of all, the blood is filtered under a certain pressure. What is happening in the filtration? This filtration process is happening in the glomerulus region of the nephron, that is this yarn-like structure. Here the molecules which are smaller in size easily pass off from the blood to become the filtrate. Fine. And what are these molecules preferably? These are the glucose molecules, these are the sodium ions, this is water, and all the except from the proteins and the blood molecules. So all the smaller particle size easily pass off from the blood and become the filtrate, which would be finally called as urine. But here again I am not saying that this is urine, this is the first step of the formation of urine. So in filtration, what is happening? All the molecules are easily going out from blood and collecting as a filtrate, which is this process happening in the glomerulus region. Fine. Now next step would be tubular reabsorption. So what is happening in the reabsorption? As the name clearly states, reabsorption, that is again absorbing. So what is happening here? The glucose molecules, the sodium, water, everything is coming from blood to the filtrate, but this is blocking the entry of RBCs and it is also blocking the entry of protein molecules. So RBC molecules and protein molecules, they don't become a part of the filtrate here. Fine. I am just rubbing it off so to give a better explanation. So RBC molecules and protein molecules, they don't easily cross the filtration process and they don't enter the filtrate, they still remain in the blood. Fine. Now in the next step, which is the reabsorption process, this reabsorption is actually happening in these regions, the PCT, the loop of Henle and the DCT, and in some parts of collecting duct also. So reabsorption process is happening through these parts of the nephron. So PCT, that stands for proximal convoluted tubule. So these are convolutions which are present there because they are entwined in a manner, and then yes, they are tubule-like structure, they look like a tube. And proximal and distal, we very well know, proximal is something which is near and distal is something which is present at a distant end. So that is what their name mean. Loop of Henle, it's a loop-like structure, that is why it is called as loop of Henle. So all these structures are responsible for making the process of reabsorption happen. So now what is supposed to be reabsorbed here when it is already being a part of filtrate? All the molecules which are used by the body, which are required by the body, but which could not, which has accidentally or through the filtration rates has become a part of urine, are required back to the body. So they, like the glucose molecules, the sodium ions, all of, and especially most importantly water. So all these ions are taken back into the blood through the process of tubular reabsorption at different areas. Like some reabsorption would be happening at PCT, some reabsorption would be happening at loop of Henle, some reabsorption would be happening at DCT, and some reabsorption would be happening at the collecting duct. Fine. So now again I will explain one mechanism of how this process is going on. Like what is happening in PCT, that is proximal convoluted tubule, all some water molecules, then ions, then glucose molecules preferably, these would be reabsorbed back into the blood. Okay, now what is happening in the loop of Henle? Again, water molecules would be taken back into the blood. Fine. Yes. Yeah. One thing I would like to mention about PCT is that PCT is having large mitochondria, and whenever we have mitochondria, we can correlate mitochondria is responsible for ATP production. And why do we need ATP? For a transportation process. If we require ATP, then that kind of transportation would be called as active transportation. So proximal convoluted tubule is actually having microvilli, okay, and they are having large mitochondria also. This microvilli will help in reabsorption process, and this mitochondria will help in formation of large amount of ATP. So proximal convoluted tubule, with the help of ATP generated by its own mitochondria, help in throwing back sodium to the blood. Fine. So this is how it is helping in the reabsorption process. It is throwing the sodium back into the blood by utilizing the energy produced by the large mitochondria present in the PCT region. Okay. And what is happening with the blood and the RBC molecules and the proteins which were not a part of the filtrate here? So they are basically reaching back to the blood through the vasa recta region. Again, when I draw the diagram of nephron, it will be very clear of where is the vasa recta. But still I can give you an idea about that rough diagram. If the glomerulus looks like this, nephron looks like this, then it is somehow like this. Then here we have some capillary channel which is called as the vasa recta. So whatever RBC and protein was not filtered, they are returned back to the blood through the vasa recta region. Okay. So here is the glomerulus, then we have PCT, then we have loop of Henle, okay, then we have DCT, then we have collecting duct. This is how nephron structure looks like. And next topic, that is loop of Henle. So loop of Henle, what they are doing is they are majorly responsible for reabsorption of water. And how? Because if a body is draining all the water which is filtered out, then we will die of dehydration. So that has to be restored. How is that happening? Loop of Henle is actually throwing out sodium into the IF. IF means the interstitial fluid, that is the fluid present in the cells adjacent to the nephron region. So in the IF, in the interstitial fluid, loop of Henle is pushing out sodium, and when the sodium accumulates in the interstitial fluid region, that is like next to it, IF is containing high amount of sodium. So whatever filtrate comes into the loop of Henle is obviously rich in water, but due to the osmotic pressure created here, a high concentration of sodium is here and high concentration of water is here. And what is the tendency of water when there is a osmotic pressure developed? The water will obviously flow to the high concentration of the ionic region. So the water starts to flow from this region to this region, ultimately helping us in reabsorption of water back into the blood. And this IF will obviously later on mixed with blood, so the water eventually ends up going into the blood. That is what is required. So this is how the loop of Henle helps in maintaining the or restoring the water molecules. And this sodium which is given out by the loop of Henle, it remains in the IF region. So when later on more filtrate comes in, it still helps in maintaining the same osmotic pressure mechanism. Similarly, DCT and collecting duct are also responsible for reabsorption of water. So now one thing I like to tell you here is that one more thing happens in the collecting duct, that is urea and glucose. Now they are also reabsorbed in the collecting duct region. And why would we say that a toxic material like urea would be reabsorbed? Yes, kidney requires some amount of urea because it helps in maintaining the pressures responsible for the filtration in the first place. I'll tell you the entire equation and then you will know how certain albumins or certain colloids are responsible for creating a certain pressure, a difference in pressure to make the filtration possible. So some amount of glucose and urea would be reabsorbed there. Okay, now we'll be talking about the last part, that is the secretion. So now what has to be, this is the last thing in the collecting duct, water and urea would be reabsorbed. And when I say reabsorbed, water would be reabsorbed to prevent dehydration and urea would be reabsorbed for the kidneys to maintain a certain amount of pressures helping in filtration. So this is how it goes. Not entire urea is reabsorbed, only a part of it, very minute quantities. Now we come to the last step, that is tubular secretion. So what is happening in tubular secretion? We can hear it out from the word secretion means giving out. Tubular means this secretion is again happening in the tubular region or the tubules. So now what has to become a part of urine? See, here filtration was happening, a certain pressure, blood was coming in, going out. There was a certain pressure created here. We got the filtrate, which will later on become urine. Initially we are not calling it urine because this filtrate has to give out, has to reabsorb few molecules and then has to give out few molecules, and finally it will be called as urine. If I draw it in a proper flowchart like manner, I can clearly say that kidneys, blood is entering here and then blood would be leaving. Obviously this is how it would be filtered out. So here a certain kind of pressure differences are there, which will form filtrate. So now this filtrate undergoes first of all reabsorption process, that useful molecules would be given back to the blood, that is reabsorption happening here, and then secretion. The molecules which have entered the blood but are not required, has to be given out, would be forming the urine. So it has to be secreted back into the urine, and finally we call it as urine. Okay, so this is how it is descending in a manner. So what has to be secreted out? Hydrogen, potassium, okay, and then all the organic acids, bases which are not required by the body, they are secreted out of the body through the process of tubular secretions. And one most important thing, that this process again is an active process. When I say active process, it means it is utilizing energy for throwing all of these material back into the urine, and finally the urine composition is formed. And so this thing is clear to all of you. Lastly, I want to say that in the process of formation of urine, around only 1 to 1.5 liters of urine is formed daily. But when we consider the filtration rates, there is a huge amount of urine which is formed but is actually not making its way to urine, because most of it is reabsorbed. More than 99% water is reabsorbed. Okay. So now I am coming back to a term here. I'll just give you out the equation to it of how an adult GFR works like. I said NFP, that is net filtration rate, which was happening in the glomerulus, is composed of actually GBHP and blood colloidal osmotic pressure plus CHP, that is okay. So net filtration pressure is actually formed by a difference of sum of these two pressures against this one. And when I say difference in these two pressures, that clearly means that a certain pressure would be going in one direction and the other pressure would be against it. So a net pressure formed by this difference would be helping in the filtration. So this is the glomerular blood hydrostatic pressure, this is the capsular hydrostatic pressure, and this is the blood colloidal osmotic pressures. We have respective values to it, and this is the final value, that is 10 mmHg. This is the final net filtration pressure. And when we consider the adult GFR, that is glomerular filtration rate, that is usually around 125 ml per minute, which forms 180, around 150 to 180 liters of urine, but at the end less than 1% of urine is secreted, so around 1.8 liters of urine is formed here. So net filtration pressure is actually the summation of these two pressure against this pressure, summation of these two pressure against this one, because they are all acting in different direction. These two are acting in the same direction and this one is acting in the opposite direction. So the final pressure leads to the formation of 1.8 liters of urine. Okay, now let's consider there is one word called as micturition. Moving on to the next topic, I'll say the next topic is how is micturition happening. So micturition we can also say in a clear English way, that is urination. So urination is, to make one thing very very clear, urination is not something which is totally happening according to your own will. There are parts and purposes where the body is responsible for controlling when to urinate And then when is the urinary bladder filled to the maximum, how the sphincters are working there. So there's a lot of things which are involved in basically making the micturition process happen. So if I say this is a kidney, this is, okay, we have two kidneys we know, then this is ureter, then this is urinary bladder, and this is the urethra. Fine, this is how a urinary structure looks like. So whenever whatever blood is being filtered from here enters ureter, then it enters urinary bladder, and it starts to expand, okay, till a point where it is filled to the maximum. Then the sphincters present here would be deciding if you can willingly micturate or willingly urinate. But then again, this is only to a certain limit. When the bladder is filled to a maximum value, then you can't really control the urination process, and you eventually end up in urinating. So through urine, basically there could be, you could easily detect or diagnose of what condition is actually persisting there. Like if I say high concentration of leukocytes in the urine would be giving out an indication of a UTI or a urinary tract infection. High concentration of glucose in the urine would be giving out a condition of glycosuria. Okay. Some amount of blood in the urine is hematuria. Amount of proteins found in the urine, if there is protein which is found in the urine, then that is called as proteinuria or albuminuria. So these are the conditions. These are the conditions which are persisting and through which we can easily diagnose of what condition or what underlying disease. This could be because of diabetes mellitus. Hematuria could be internal bleeding. Proteinuria could be high blood pressure, high blood volumes or pregnancy conditions. These are some of the things which are happening, leading to easily collect high leukocytes, glucose, protein molecules or blood in the urine. Then I'll also be naming about few of the hormones which are responsible for formation of urine process, or maybe stimulating urine or suppressing the urination process. And we must have learned that in the endocrine system also, that there is a hormone called as ADH, that is anti-diuretic hormone. Then there is a hormone called as aldosterone. Fine. So ADH, aldosterone, then parathyroid secretions. So all of them collectively are helping in maintaining the concentration of urine, of like what ionic concentration it would be rich in, or how much supply of water would, or how much water content would be there. So basically the most important one being ADH, that is anti-diuretic hormone, is responsible for defining the water concentration of the urine. And these two are controlled by, say, alcohol and caffeine. Fine. So alcohol and caffeine are responsible for suppressing the ADH, and ADH is basically responsible for reabsorption process of water back into the blood. So whenever any person is under the influence of alcohol or is taking drinks which is highly caffeinated or contains caffeine, they are responsible for suppressing the release of antidiuretic hormone. And this ADH is responsible for increasing the reabsorption of water. So if ADH will not be released or released in a suppressed quantity, then reabsorption of water back into the blood will not happen. And that is the case when people frequently urinate, or when the tendency of urination increases under the influence of few of these conditions. Fine. So now we know how frequent urination happens. Okay, so ADH is basically responsible for stimulating the aquaporins which are present. When you look into the diagram of PCT, I was telling you that they are responsible, or PCTs are having microvilli, and loop of Henle is also responsible for absorption of water. So they are having aquaporins present here. But when ADH is released, ADH actually directs the aquaporins to be thrown to the other end also. Not only they are basically restricted to the basal end, but when ADH is released, the aquaporins are shifted from base. They are present on both the ends now. Fine. So now when aquaporins are also present here, then good absorption of water takes place. But under the influence of these conditions, this is not released. So aquaporins would be staying on the basal side. They are not on this side. Hence, water reabsorption does not take place, and we frequently micturate. Okay. So this is all from urinary system, and about the hormonal control of how the autonomic is controlling urine formation, I'll be discussing in the next lecture. Thank you.